Welcome to the Pharos Fit podcast, where we help you to explore your capacity to move better, push further, and achieve your limitless potential through fitness, nutrition, recovery, and lifestyle. Thanks for joining us, guys. I am here today with the Emylee Covell.
Hi, guys.
Today's podcast is going to be all about recovery. It's for anybody who's interested in avoiding injury, which I think we all are.
Absolutely.
Also, anybody who's interested in recovering from injury and avoiding pain in the future. Recovery is a huge part of what we do at Pharos Athletic Club. Right from the outset, we decided that mechanics was going to play a huge part in our, in what we do at the gym. And Emylee developed a repair program to help, as we said, athletes prepare for and recover from the kind of activity that we do at the club. We have a very active membership. We do a lot of lifting, we do a lot of moving, we do a lot of running, we do a lot of boxing, we do a lot of everything. And as we know, the more things we do, the more things we need to recover from. So from today's episode, we're going to learn a lot from Emylee about, the best way to prepare for and to recover from activity.
Woo woo. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Why don't we kind of go back to the beginning? How did you get into this? How did this whole thing happen? This kind of fascination with repair.
I mean, I know if you've listened to any of the episodes before, I have mentioned my background as a former fat kid and self-pronounced cripple with rheumatoid arthritis and hip dysplasia that really just kind of turned my own life and health around. And now I'm super passionate about paying it forward and kind of helping others. So I'm a movement therapist. I have a background in kinesiology, certifications from NASM, CrossFit level 1, yoga, FRC, and anatomy trained structural integration. And from there, I like to think that I integrate a really comprehensive system to assess, address, and ultimately rewire biomechanical faults in individuals. Yeah. Created originally as a way to quickly assess mobility issues in order to provide better warm-up and cool-down and modification protocols in a group setting. We now kind of enhance that and refer to it as the repair protocol. And now it's really a step-by-step system of body re-education that has helped, I'm proud to say, like thousands of people reduce pain and restore movement and increase performance. And
also I think you've done it in such a way, in such a language that has made it more accessible for meatheads like me who typically avoid this kind of stuff. Just because we feel uncomfortable with it, but the way that you've done it and the way that you've, like I said, the language you've brought to it has made it very accessible for more than just your average yogi, which has been, super beneficial. So tell us a little bit about how you really brought the system into developing the mechanics program at Pharos.
Well, I guess my ultimate goal with the Pharos Mechanics is to bridge the gap between rehab and performance. Everyone comes into the gym with a history of injuries and imbalances and specific needs and traumas, past traumas. Right. And it's really our job as coaches to individualize each person's workout so they can train to avoid pain. They say no pain, no gain, but that's not entirely true. And of course, we always say we want to encourage a doctor's clearance and we want to avoid diagnosing or treating injuries, but we really do want to have a solid understanding of how to assess movement dysfunction, how to modify exercises, and how to help people progress safely within the scope of our practice. Every person deserves to feel supported and know that they're doing the right program for them. So I think how we integrate that is it really starts with the first interaction at Pharos. Sure, some people jump into a class and get right into the feel and the energy of the group environment, and they have, experience doing that kind of thing. But for the most part, the people who come and take their first experience at Pharos is with our intro session, that 75-minute personal training session. We interview them in depth about their history and their goals and any histories of injuries that they may have, and of course, their expectations or goals in joining Pharos. This is super important to me because I like to know how people fundamentally move before throwing them into any kind of performance.
Yeah.
And I really believe that assessments should be the backbone of any training program.
Why load bad mechanics, right? That's what you were saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see it all the time. They want to get strong, so they come in and do strength and just load a lot of volume and a lot of load onto bad mechanics. And it just, you have to strip off, you have so much more work to do. And like once, if and when they do get injured, to undo the damage of the work that they've done, when if they were to have just come in at the beginning and assessments and individualization and mobility served as the backbone of their training program, they would have progressed a lot faster and not had gotten injured. So, we put, of course, people through a body composition that lets us know where their, muscle mass, body fat, basal metabolic rate are. But we kind of take it one step further and do a range of motion and mobility screen to get an idea of their imbalances, their faulty movement patterns, and any other kind of glaring issues that get in the way of exercise routines. Bad posture patterns, injuries, sedentary lifestyles, forward head or text neck, tight hamstrings, things like that, So it's important that we meet people where they are, figure out where they are. And then from there, I help them build a really individualized protocol of, the types of movements that they should be doing or avoiding when coming into the gym. So, definitely not a cookie cutter approach to fitness. Mechanics is really that system of body re-education where you come into the gym and it's more about developing awareness of your body, where you're at, knowing exactly, where your strengths, where your weaknesses are, where your adhesions are, and developing a plan of action from there.
It's interesting how you think you move is not actually how you move.
Oh, absolutely.
When I watch myself back on video, if you have a video of yourself working out, you have like this picture in your head of what you look like when you work out. And then you watch it back and it's like, oh my God, like I move so badly. Like my hips don't move. My head's in a weird place. Like my shoulders aren't even.
Yeah, that's the great like Instagram meme, like how I think I look when I do this and how I actually look when I do this, and it's so true. Like one of my favorite assessments is like the overhead squat, and having people just overhead squat air. So their arms up over their head and seeing like, the hip shift and the tilt or the levator scap lifting or their forward head or their, internally rotated shoulders and all of that, So it's, that's a portion of it. And from there, I meet privately with people. I give people, homework assignments that is specific warm up and cool down procedures that they should do specific for their own adhesions. But, we also just want to offer as many healing domains in the gym as possible. So we have an in-house massage therapist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, and these mobility sessions. So we, have created this like really special environment where therapists are speaking to each other and we're also speaking to coaches. So coaches know when they come into class what's the best thing and the best protocol for these athletes. And
you mentioned this repair protocol. Can you kind of dive into exactly what that protocol is?
Sure. This very proprietary information that I've created. No, to break it down really simply, it is our job as therapists and as coaches. So whether you call yourself a strength coach or a corrective exercise coach or, massage therapist or chiropractor or like anyone who's working in this industry of dealing with people and bodies and maximizing performance, it is our job to accurately and consistently evaluate 4 things: position, activation, range of motion, and adhesions. So when I say position, it's, what positions are you trying to get into? What does ideal alignment look and feel and stack like in your body? We look at positions through kind of 3 different ways. There are the 9 global movement patterns. Technically, there are only 7 and I added 2. So if you look it up, it's going to be like 7 global movement patterns. What is Emylee talking about? I added 2 to the list. And 9 global movement patterns are, walking. How do you walk? Do you have a hip shift? Does your head lean forward? Do you walk like a duck with your toes turned out? How do you squat? How do you hinge? How do you forward fold? How do you hinge with a flat back? How do you pick up groceries up off the floor? And then, how do you lunge? A single leg variation. From there, it's how do you horizontal push and pull? Can you push someone off of you? Very important skill. Can you pull someone towards you? Very important skill. Vertical push and pull. That's a huge thing when you get older. People can't even put their cups back in their cupboard on the top shelf of their cupboard because they can't press overhead, and then twist. And then the two that I added are extension, global extension. I think people are really missing that. So I added it to it. And then of course the anti-movement, which is core stability,
right?
Which,
and it's interesting. I mean, we're not just talking about gym stuff here, right? We're talking about like the real world.
Life.
Yeah.
Like, walking around, squatting, getting on and off the toilet for the rest of your life is the number one skill that you need. Like if, my dad always jokes that he's like, if I get to the age that I can no longer get on and off the toilet by myself, like I'm done. That's it. Like that, that's the end of my life, So we look at positions through that. We also look at positions, as the joint by joint approach, which is developed by Gray Cook. And then of course now the FRC movement, functional range conditioning. And that is, your ankles and your knees and your hips and a little bit more of a joint by joint approach. So we look at that. And then we look at the myofascial net as well, which I'm like totally obsessed with, as developed by Tom Myers, and knowing that, your hinge mechanics, your ability to forward fold is connected to the fascia underneath your feet, all the way up to your occipital lobes, even to your brow line and all the adhesions that run along the whole back of your body and, everywhere in there, which is a whole podcast for another time and probably another audience of people who are way nerdier than the ones listening right now. But so position. And then next we look at activation. And it's mostly what muscles do we need to engage in order to support the position. So I'm not talking about our prime movers. I'm talking about our stabilizers, the little deep, the intrinsic deep core stabilizers. We call these anticipatory muscles, meaning that these muscles should be on and working and fired before any movement actually even occurs. And I think a lot of people miss that, they just go to bench press. And so they just go and push as opposed to stabilize, activate, and then push, and find that their pushing is then a lot stronger. They create the support for these prime movers to move. So, the more stable structure, the more potential to generate more force and power. It causes lack of stabilization, causes your body to compensate either by generating momentum, which we see all the time in the gym, like, like the heaving weight kind of people.
The way that Jeff does barbell.
I know I was going to say that, but I don't think the people at home right now can accurately see Jeff, but just imagine, and then, or they just create adapted movement patterns to try to overcome the lack of stability that they have, So we look at position, we look at activation, and then next, of course, is range of motion. So we're taking note of end range capacity, of course, without struggle or with struggle, and noticing any compensation. So, if someone's moving weight over their head or just their arms over their head, do we notice that their shoulders internally rotate, or that their head pokes forward, or that their ribs arch up? So, you're trying to keep a really fine-tuned eye on that kind of stuff. And it's not just about flexibility. The difference between flexibility and mobility is really neurological control. It's your ability for your brain to speak to your body, to move in a certain way that creates stability and proper position, instead of just like end range flexibility that a lot of people, I think of when they think of like mobility training, And then, of course, so position, activation, range of motion. And then what gets in the way of all of those things? Adhesions, or roadblocks, or I like to call them sticky bits. And people always laugh when I say that. You didn't laugh. Thanks for laughing. But he gave me a pity laugh there. I hope you're laughing at home. But, we want to assess and address these adhesions that limit position and range of motion. So what's getting in the way of these positions, activation, and range of motion? The roadblocks can often be physical, like, of course, little nuggets, knots and nuggets here and there that kind of, limit the ability to move or get in the way or click over your shoulders or whatever it is. But it can also be mental and neurological. A lot of times we have a past of trauma, and our brain and our nervous system creates those roadblocks for us that we can no longer move in that way. So we don't. And maybe there's nothing actually physically getting in the way. It's just our, that we need to work a little bit more on a neurological scale.
Right. We see that a lot in squats, right? When we first get people in doing squats, it's not always that they physically can't do it, but there's something mentally that stops them going below parallel.
Right. And that's why it's nice to then get like a bench behind them. And it's like, just sit how you sit on a couch. Sit how you sit on your toilet.
Well, yeah, it's like that. You do this every day on the toilet. Like, why when you're in the gym,
it becomes an exercise that you fear instead of just a functional movement that you do. Yeah. And, so you're looking for signs of overuse, what needs lengthening, what needs strengthening. And, I always say tightness is really just weakness in disguise, which,
say that to me a lot.
Dude, meatheads hate when I say that. The look on their face is so funny. It's like, but I can deadlift 400 pounds. What do you mean I'm weak? And I'm like, you're weak. Your hamstrings are tight. You don't have, a shortened muscle has shortened ability, shortened range of power and exertion. So if you can't access a portion of your muscle, then you can't access its strength either. So tightness is always, always weakness in disguise. And then from there, you got to pattern it, right? You got to achieve good position, activation, and mechanics. We got to rewire that circuitry to create these instinctual movement patterns that just become kind of proprioception in your body. So in short, or not so short, that's the repair protocol.
And with the repair protocol, like, are different days focused on like different kinds of mobility, like hip mobility on one day, ankle on another, or is it like a combination of?
So when it comes to like a group setting, like in repair classes, we definitely sync it up to the programming in the gym. So if Monday is more of a squat emphasis, then, we're definitely focusing on that. So it's like, hips, what are you repairing from? So what was yesterday? What are you preparing for either today or tomorrow? And then there's kind of an element of meet them where they are. So it's like, what are you also just dealing with that we can kind of go through? I do find, especially with the background in, exploring myofascial net, and that, a knee problem is not always a knee problem. It can often be a hip or a bilateral, cross-diagonal shoulder problem. So sometimes when you are just focusing on the joint by joint approach, you're missing an opportunity to get a lot more, see a lot more change happen when you think of things in terms of systems. So maybe I'll work posterior chain. So even though it's like we're not just working hamstrings, we're also working upper back and neck positioning and things like that. So I would say yes, to some extent it's focused, but then to another extent it also is, your body is, you're not a set amount of muscles. You have one muscle that inserts at a set amount of places. And so sometimes it helps to kind of like think of your body as an entire unit, not separate units that need compartmentalizing.
And how does that differ from the one-on-one mobility work that you do, like the group stuff versus the one-on-one?
Well, people either come to work one-on-one because of a fear of training due to injury or mobility gaps that are affecting their performance. So the one-on-one is a lot more screening. If they have a history of injury, it is, where are you at in your rehab? Where are you at in your physical therapy? What have you been cleared for by your physical therapist? And are we on phase 1, 2, 3, or 4 of physical therapy and getting back to performance? If it is a performance issue, it's where are your gaps? And then can I give you some specific drills to help improve those gaps? So it's a lot more focused, and the individualized stuff is, it's a lot of homework. You're signing up to come in 15 minutes or half an hour before or after class, and getting more work done specifically for you. I would say in the group setting, we're working on like more of these global imbalances that we see most people come in with, posture issues, hinge issues, hamstring issues, like more of the everyday stuff or the program specific stuff that we're working on. But in the individualized approach, it's oftentimes people coming back post-injury, post-physical therapy, there's this horrible place of, okay, I had 6 physical therapy sessions and now what?
Right.
And I'm not quite ready. You know, I had a meniscus tear and I'm not quite ready to come back into a strength training or a sprint class or, you know, train with just a lot of like change of levels or things like that. So it's like, how do I manage my training volume and load now? What modifications do I need? And what exercises take me from physical therapy, which is maybe phase 1 or 2, to now phase 3 or 4, where it's that progressive overload that gets them back into the performance that, you know, hopefully, or is their goal, you know.
And I'm assuming, like, as always with gym stuff, you see trends, right? You see common faults with communities. What are the most common ones you see, you know, with our community? What are the common faults you see in people?
Well, in general public, so not necessarily athletes, but just people coming straight off the street. A big one is a lack of global extension. So lack of hip extension and chest extension.
Well, what does that mean? Like, for the average person?
For the average person. The lack of ability to chest bump the world. You know, their shoulders are always rolled forward. Their shoulders and arms are in front of their body because everything they do is forward leaning. They're driving. They go from, you know, driving their cars and being hunched forward and their traps stressing out up into their ears to sitting down at their computer with their arms in front of their body. They don't spend a lot of times with their arms behind their body. And if they do, then they'll compensate with a lot of thoracic extension and rib flaring and not a lot of, like, you know, spinal alignment. So we see a lack of extension in your chest. We see a lack of extension in through your hips. You know, people sit all day. They're sitting at a 90-degree angle. They move from their car at a 90-degree angle to their office at a 90-degree angle, to their couch watching Netflix at a 90-degree angle, or, you know, maybe recline back a little bit. And people are really missing the ability to extend their hips. So, you know, we say like, oh, you have weak glutes and you can't access your glutes. So a lot of people are like, oh, you got to strengthen. Let's start doing squats. But if you're not even able to get into a hip extended position, then you're not really able to access the strength of your glutes that you need in general. Right. I say this to you all the time, right? Like, we can do reverse hypers all day, but if we're not training the posterior tilt of your pelvis and the extension of your hips, then, you know, your reverse hypers are only going to get you so far before we start to see more kind of compensation. So lack of extension is a big one. And then lack of proper hinge mechanics is huge. You know, like how you pick up your groceries. Like, people just round and forward fold and flex all the time. And what I'm really talking about is hinge is the ability for your hamstrings to separate from your hip, to separate from your spine. So if you're having trouble visualizing that, imagine that we're looking for an angle, not an arch. You know, that when you bend over and pick something up, I don't want to see this global arch of your body. I want to see like a 90-degree, like flat back. Like, I want to be able to eat dinner off your back. That's how flat your back. And
yeah, I have to say, I think when I've done intros and done screens and stuff, this is probably the biggest one that I see. That people, I'll say all day long, just shove your bum back as far as you possibly can and keep your back flat. And the amount of people that just cannot shove their bum back, they just can't do it.
Lean their body forward. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
And like, I'll demo it and I'll say, watch what I do and then copy me. And then they'll do it. It's like, do you think you just did what I did?
Right.
And they do. And they do. They think it's the same thing.
Yes.
It's like, no.
Yeah. And then another one is lack of rotation, because not a lot of our life allows us to do rotation. Both that is spinal rotation, but also hip. So internal and external rotation, and then shoulder internal and external rotation. I see a lack of that. And then a lack, in a lot of other like gyms and fitness programs, I see a lack of training that rotation. Yeah. So then when people rotate, they just throw into their low back. Your lumbar spine are big junky discs with a lot of fluid in between. So they're, of course, the most flexible, as opposed to your mid back, which has ribs attached, right? So you're not going to get as much rotation from there. So a lot of people just throw into like a twist and just crank through their low back, as opposed to finding more global spinal rotation and finding, each segment of their spine to have that available rotation.
I think like even with people who train a lot, like I remember when I used to box a lot, like I used to be rotating all the time, right? Because I was, throwing those kind of shots and I was focusing on a lot of twisting and so forth. And then when I stopped boxing, like I wasn't doing as much rotation. Everything was just like
forward, backward, forwards and backwards. Yeah, and we say like, oh, a varied fitness, you know, oh, you're doing something different every day. But if you look at the actual patterns of your body, are you?
And then I remember when I went back to boxing, it's like, oh my God, I can't move like I used to be able to move. And a lot of that was because I just hadn't been rotating. I hadn't been, hadn't been twisting anymore.
Yeah. And then another one, this is a small one, but a real lack of wrist extension. And that, again, has to come from, you know, our smartphones and always being forward or texting forward. And people come into the gym and like they can't hold a plank position because it's tight on their wrists. And they're like, oh, my wrists don't do that. Well, of course they don't do that. So they can't, like, you're not doing it. You're not practicing it. Or you come right in and then a lot of people throw right in a barbell onto their front rack position. And then they're like, oh, that hurts my wrists. You know, well, it's like, of course it does. There's nothing in your life that you are doing that is training wrist extension, especially wrist extension under load. So I think we see a lot of people miss that and then call it like a problem, as in like, oh, they have wrist issues, so they just avoid anything. They, you know, hold planks on their fists and stuff. And that's it. That's okay. You can absolutely do that. But we also kind of want to push the needle of like, okay, well, what's phase one of getting you to better wrist extension? Instead of just avoiding it entirely, can we practice, you know, up against the wall, spreading your hands, gripping every knuckle bed into the floor, practicing, you know, weight distribution so you're not just landing it all into your wrists and stuff like that. So I like seeing that. That's general public common faults. And then for high level athletes, it is an overdominance of large prime movers. So, you know, people come in and they're super strong of their prime movers. They can move a lot of weight. They can move it quickly. They can move it powerfully, but weakness of their stabilizing muscles. So those anticipatory muscles I was talking about earlier. So yeah.
And, you know, you've been doing this a while now. You've seen a lot of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people. Why do you think these programs are successful?
Thanks for saying they're successful.
Well, they are.
It's true. I always joke that I am the most annoying coach that you'll ever meet.
Annoying coach, annoying wife. It's true.
How you do one thing is how you do all the things, you know? But it's true. I'm so nitpicky. Like, I will not let you move like shit. And I have a very keen eye on assessing and addressing and seeing these common movement faults. So I think a lot of that is just being very aware, hyper aware, that you know, that part of my personality that's already like that lends itself really well to you know, being in the gym and noticing those things and, you know, working with people. But unlike, you know, in terms of the program itself, it's like, you know, I think a lot of other flexibility programs fail because they're not providing long-lasting improvement in mobility. They, you know, quick fixes, 3 minutes here, you stretch your hamstring, forward fold. I can touch my toes. And the next week, oh, why am I back to where I was before, you know? It's successful because it's built around creating neurological control and patterning as soft tissue is changing and your positions are improving. So once you achieve a new range, how do I teach my central nervous system to control that newly acquired range? You know, that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is like understanding as well. You're very good at explaining to people what the problem is and how to fix it, as opposed to, you know, it's very easy to go online and watch a stretch video about how to stretch this, how to stretch that. But you don't really understand what the problem is, or, you know, why you are weak in that area, or, you know,
right.
You don't really have any comprehension. So I think that's huge.
And then, you know, for me, I think also it's now that I have that eye, and as I'm getting into, you know, as I'm moving away from, you know, soft tissue therapist and coach into more managerial and, you know, being the owner and being a mom and not having as much time to work one-on-one with people, I'm now really passionate about teaching athletes and coaches to understand the communication of their own movement patterns. You know, I think that passion is ultimately really infectious, and it gets people really pumped up about re-educating their own body and what it's capable of.
You know, we talked about the one-to-one stuff, the one-on-one stuff. We talked about the you know, the group sessions. Now you're a mom, and,
and you're a dad.
I'm a dad. Business owners, all that kind of stuff. How is this now scalable? How do we grow this thing?
It really comes through with our coaches development. We have a mechanics portion, and I hope we want all of our coaches to say that they are as annoying and nitpicky as I am. I want all of our coaches to be able to see and witness and be able to prevent injury through the ability to foresee all these faulty movement patterns and know what modifications and cues to provide. And of course, this course is growing and never ending and constantly evolving, but that's now the thing that I'm most passionate about, is how can I pay it forward to the coaches who are seeing all these athletes, and while also still empowering the athletes themselves to just play a larger role in their own health. People care a lot about how they their strength gains and the weight on the bar and the weight on the scale, and I want people to care just as much about their range of motion and what they're missing. So I'll keep paying that forward. But for now, I'm just focused on developing coaches that they can have the same eye to stop injury before it starts.
I think there's a lot of people out there who have had injuries, who do have problems, and they're worried about getting back into training. Do you have any advice for people who are coming back from injury that you'd like to?
Absolutely. First, get cleared. Get cleared by your doctor, your physical therapist. And then it's a constant ongoing process of learn or relearn, and then control, and then from there load and explode. A lot of people just come in and get right to the load part. But learn the mechanics, learn to control those mechanics. Then from there you can load those mechanics and then explode and get, a lot more fast moving. So progressive overload is really the answer. And that takes patience, and it doesn't always take the quote unquote listening to your body, because sometimes your ego is speaking way louder than your body is. One of my mentors and creators of the postpartum and pregnancy and postpartum athleticism, Brianna Battles, she instead says, listen to the voice that you have been trained to ignore, which I love. And then, from there, make sure that you enlist the right help. Get someone to check you out and help you build a program that takes you from rehab back into performance. Make sure that person is nitpicky. If they annoy you a little bit, they're probably the right person to help you. Maybe I'm just saying that. And the biggest thing is don't just dive back in. And remember, doing nothing is doing nothing. A lot of people come in and they're like, oh, I'm taking it easy, I'm laying off my shoulder. That almost never helps in the long run. For acute pain, you gotta stop a little bit. You gotta scale back. You gotta let inflammation lower. You gotta, do the RICE methodology of if you have an acute injury. But eventually we need to adopt the protocol of training the position, learning the activation, the stabilizing, getting back into whatever available range of motion you have, and improving that overall patterning.
Very cool. So from here, any actionable tips that you can give people who are looking to, increase their performance somewhat?
Yeah, for the performance-driven folk out there, build better warm-up and cool-down protocols specific to your programming. Right. So, don't just come in and do the stuff and skimp out on the warm-up.
Yeah, I see that a lot. People just do the same warm-ups even though the workout is completely different,
right? This is my thing. I mean, unless you have a really thorough joint by joint body body warm-up, think about what's the focus, what is the emphasis for today, what are you repairing from what was yesterday's workout, what are you preparing for either today or tomorrow's workout, and then of course any extras, the traumas that you have, the little impingement here that you're feeling, I would say that that's probably the biggest tip, is build better warm up and cool down protocols. And if you don't know how to do that, you can go on YouTube University and find the stretch for this and the stretch for that, but if you can enlist the right help and, find a coach that is, as nerdy as I am about corrective exercise and improving performance,
few and far between.
Then you've really gotten that kind of unfair advantage that proper mobility training provides.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. That was a lot.
It was a lot.
You shared a lot there.
I did. I try to like put in as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, it's great. I'm sure.
I'm a pusher, you know.
Okay, guys, thanks again for tuning in. If you would like more from us, you can find us at Pharos Echo Park on Instagram. If you're in the neighborhood, we'd love to see you. We are a neighborhood gym. We are a family gym. We'd love to see you at 1316 Glendale Boulevard. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please click the subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much. Please share with your friends. Please share with your family. And please tune in again soon. We will be back with you very soon. Take care.
Thanks so much.